Welcome back. It is the Saturday Show, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napolis with me. Thank you for making us a part of your Saturday morning. I hope you have great weekend plans. I hope you had a good week so far. Alex, what's up?
Good to be back. Another Saturday here with you, Collision Chris. And
Did you hear that?
Of course I did. And so, yeah, man, happy to be back. Happy to be here talking sports with you.
Oh, yeah. It's been a long week. It's been a really long week. I don't know why it feels so long.
I would agree with that.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to be back. And I want to say thank you to everybody for listening. I talked to a couple of people last week, and they were like, hey, I heard you on the radio. That was awesome. So, I don't know. It was cool to hear. So, yeah, if you're listening, we really appreciate it. And,
absolutely. Thanks for making us a part of your Saturday morning.
You got any good weekend plans or not really?
I mean, I'll probably be working all day today, obviously here with you right now. And then later, I'll be working the Utah State versus Air Force game.
Oh, fun.
And then after that, I'm probably heading straight down to America First Field and enjoying me some footy.
Great. We'll be talking college basketball. Let's do that to start off the show, right? I mean, that was obviously the biggest story of the week was the University of Utah getting their guy. They fired Craig Smith last week, and then didn't take too long. We all knew Alex Jensen was the leading candidate. I don't think anybody was thinking otherwise. Nobody was hiding that. Alex Jensen was the guy the whole time, and it was only a matter of making things official. And yesterday it was made official. Alex Jensen, assistant coach for the Mavericks, he did accept the offer to join the University of Utah and become the next men's head basketball coach.
And I think it's a great hire. And like you mentioned, it's the guy who's been the leading candidate and probably the favorite since this whole process started. Former Utah player. He, coached with Quinn Snyder for the Utah Jazz, spent the last couple of years with the Dallas Mavericks, has a lot of experience at different levels, and I think theoretically, he can come in and make a difference for this Utah team. And it's a difference that is much needed, like we talked about last week.
Yeah, well, it was interesting after, the news came out about Craig Smith, and this is something we talked about last Saturday, was that everybody immediately was like, oh, Alex Jensen. That's the guy. And he interviewed for the job the last cycle when they ultimately did go with Craig Smith. But it was just interesting to hear. I mean, we had so many people on the station coming on, a lot of people that played for the Utes or were involved with the Utes as coaches or whatever. And it seemed like every person was like, oh, yeah, it's got to be Alex Jensen. And I think it just points to the fact that they wanted to keep this one in-house. They wanted the next head coach to be a Ute. And I think that matters to them. And I think it's a big hire for the program because of the spot where they're at right now, right? Football came off a pretty disappointing couple of seasons, right? Basketball, under Craig Smith, they never made the NCAA tournament, so that had been kind of a down period as well. So they kind of just needed something big here. They needed to make a splash. They need something to just inject juice and excitement into the Runnin Utes basketball program. And they felt like the way to do that was bringing in a former Ute, bringing in an alum, somebody who's well-respected by everybody here in Salt Lake City, certainly. Like you said, been involved with, obviously, the University of Utah basketball program, but then he was with the Jazz for so long as well. So Alex Jensen really has a large footprint here in Salt Lake City, and I think it's a great job. I mean, certainly if everybody comes on and says Alex Jensen is the guy and they ultimately go with somebody else, like that looks like a huge miss. So, I mean, the fact that they got him, the fact that it didn't take too long, it didn't seem like there was a lot of drama, I think everybody's excited.
They got their guy. At the end of the day, they got the guy that they wanted. And I remember, obviously, when the Craig Smith news broke and we had a bunch of guests on all the various shows here on the KSL Sports Zone, everybody mentioned Alex Jensen was the guy. It sounded like all the former players, everybody involved with the process said Alex Jensen is the guy. And so it's very, very good for Utah to get the guy that obviously they wanted, obviously everybody else wanted, because this is a program who the last couple of years has been not the best.
Yeah.
And they needed a turnaround. They just need rejuvenation. They need to figure out, basically scrap the project that they were working on with Craig Smith and just start fresh with a guy who knows the culture of what it is to be a Utah basketball player. So, like I said, in theory, it is the perfect hire for Utah.
I do worry a little bit when you get back to, he was obviously a member of the late 90s team that had all that success under Coach Majerus. And I don't think that he is going to, I know he's not going to come in and be like, okay, I played for Majerus. That was the most successful period in Utah history. So we're going to try and replicate that. And I don't think that's what Alex Jensen is going to do. But that is a bit of you want to be cautious when you do that approach. You don't want to try to replicate something that worked 25 years ago just because it worked 25 years ago, because it's a lot different now. But fortunately, the cool thing that I like about Alex Jensen is that, it's not just his experience with the Utes that makes him such a good candidate. This is a guy that had the highest level of success coaching at the G League. And then he was, again, with the Jazz for 10 years, was a really well-respected assistant coach under Quinn Snyder. And he helped with the development of Rudy Gobert. And that was kind of his thing, his calling card. It was like Rudy Gobert was his project.
Yeah.
And we saw what Rudy turned into, one of the greatest defensive players in NBA history.
What is it, 4 now?
I believe it's 4, yeah.
Yeah.
And then going to Dallas, obviously, and Derek Lively had a tremendous rookie season in Dallas with Alex Jensen over there. So we know that it's not just his experience with the Utes. And I think that's the interesting kind of wrench thrown into this is, yes, you would expect some of the old school style mentality of being under Majerus and things like that. But then this is also a guy who has the NBA experience that, again, rejuvenation, I think, is a great way to put it. Just the excitement, I think they want to put butts in seats. I think that's the bottom line, if nothing else. I think donors are willing to open up their pockets. I think the fans are going to fill the stadium, and the Runnin Utes have to capitalize off that right away. Because especially now, like if you don't win fast in college basketball, it's going to be hard.
Well, especially entering a new league, right? It's not the Pac-12 anymore. You're entering the Big 12, which is a very, very good basketball conference. There is national contenders inside of the Big 12 in teams like Houston, teams like Arizona, teams like BYU. And so you have to be able to take a step up. You have to take a step up. Yeah. This is part of the evolution of what they hope Utah basketball can become. And it starts with Alex Jensen, right? He, like you mentioned, he has a good track record of being able to develop talent. And so I'm interested to see, one, how this hire is going to impact recruiting, because I do think that Utah basketball has been a little bit behind on the recruiting scale compared to other schools in the Big 12. And, of course, development, right? Not to compare too much to BYU, but Kevin Young has been able to figure out the perfect way to get that team to start playing NBA-style basketball in college and be successful at it, right? 7-game win streak for BYU, despite the slow start. Wasn't the best of starts for BYU. Can Alex Jensen come in and kind of replicate that with Utah? That's going to be the question.
Yeah, I don't want to use the word replicate. I mean, because it's hard not. It's hard not to compare the two programs.
Exactly.
Right? They're so close.
Exactly.
Such a storied rivalry, but I think the bottom line is take advantage of it right now while you can, because people are excited. Donors are going to open up their wallets. Recruits are going to be interested at the very least. So you have to capitalize on that ASAP. 100%. Because if you look like, things aren't going well in year one, those checkbooks are going to close up real quick. The donors are going to commit elsewhere real quick. So it makes it all the more important to win right away. And I'm not saying, come out the gates with a 10-game win streak.
Right.
Because, like you said, BYU got off to a really slow start under Kevin Young. And there were questions, but they turned things around. So, yeah, you don't need to start off the season and look like the best team in the country, but at least look competitive in the Big 12, which, by the way, the Utes have at times this season. They beat Kansas.
Right.
So we know that, even though they were picked to finish last in the Big 12, we know that the bones are there. So, yeah, add a little more cash, add some highly rated recruits that are going to be excited to come play for Alex Jensen, and I do think it's going to work.
And I think that's the biggest thing, honestly, is the fact that this season they are competing and they are fighting and they are playing good games, right? They just battled really, really well against West Virginia. Didn't get the win here at the Huntsman Center, but it was still a solid performance, right? And I think that's important to kind of put into perspective and to kind of think about heading into next season, because the foundation is there. I think that there's a lot of players on that team that have a lot of potential that can be developed. And so, again, the hope is that Alex Jensen can come in, build on that foundation, and hopefully take a step next season in his first year. Yeah. It's going to take a second. It's going to take a minute.
You think it will?
I think so. I don't expect them to come out of the gates and next season and be automatic contenders.
Right, okay. So you're saying it's okay. I got you. Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I mean, it's interesting because you look at their schedule this year. They only have obviously the Houston loss really stands out. The Iowa State loss really stands out. The Arizona loss was pretty bad. But outside of those games, they did lose to Baylor pretty bad too, I guess, but I don't know. But then
the list just keeps getting longer as you go down.
The more you look at it, there are some bad losses. But then there's other, they played at Oklahoma State decently well. You mentioned the senior night game versus West Virginia. They lost by 2 points. The UCF game right before Craig Smith got fired, they could have won that game as well. So the bones are there, and I'm excited to see what goes on. I was reading up on some articles from our guy Steve Bartle, our Utes insider for KSLSports.com, just to clarify things. Alex Jensen is going to remain with the Dallas Mavericks throughout the remainder of their season. That's not a surprise. I think that was expected, but it's nice to have some clarification on that, just because obviously the Mavericks are their own sort of mess right now. And you never know what's going to happen there. So shout out to Steve for clarifying things right there. But Alex Jensen did have a big Zoom meeting with the team, with the players and some of the assistant coaches, and we still don't know what Alex Jensen's staff is going to look like. Obviously, Andre Miller is a name that people are throwing out as somebody that could join the staff and be one of the big assistants there, and that would help as far as recruiting and donors and things like that. So stay tuned for that, obviously. Again, Steve Bartle at KSLSports.com. Killing it.
Fantastic. He was all over this story.
From the start.
From the get-go. And I think back to his big board and his potential, his article about potential candidates to be the head coach. I remember Alex Jensen was right at the top.
Yeah.
He knew.
You know who else was on there? Richard Pitino, who they interviewed.
Yeah.
He was
on top of it, man.
So, yeah, stay tuned on that. But right now, it's hard because the Utes still have a game. Obviously, tonight they play at BYU. Hasn't been any official decision on whether they're going to play in any postseason sort of tournament. And that's a tough conversation because on one hand, it's like, yeah, you kind of want to just close the book on this season and move on. But then on the other hand, it's like there are guys on this team who might never play basketball again.
100%.
And you feel for those guys. You feel for them. You want them to be able to experience as much basketball as they can before it's time for them to move on. So we'll see. I don't expect them to play in, the NIT or anything like that. But again, we'll see. But big game tonight at BYU. Number 23 ranked BYU. Obviously, the Cougars, you mentioned, 7-game winning streak right now. They had an impressive win on Wednesday night, double overtime at number 10 Iowa State. Meanwhile, the Utes, I believe they won at home against Arizona State, and then they lost at home versus West Virginia on Tuesday. So it's not like the Utes are coming in like a half-dead dog, right?
Yes.
I think, and especially we know, obviously, Utah beat BYU earlier in the season, and I'm not going to expect Utah to beat the Cougars in Provo at the Marriott Center while the Cougars are riding so high. But we got to remember this is a rivalry game, right? And I do fully expect it to be competitive to the very end. I would be shocked if it was a blowout either way.
Like you mentioned, it's the rivalry game right here in the city of Utah. It's Utah BYU. I think they did a phenomenal job at home. It wasn't the best performances for either side, let's be real. The free throw line free throw shooting in that first game at the Huntsman Center was not the best. I think both sides had a chance to win it, before it got to overtime off some free throws, and they couldn't make their free throws. Not the best of performances. Utah sneaks away with the 73-72 win in overtime in that one, and I'm positive, those guys down there at BYU, they got some revenge on their mind.
26.7% from three for BYU in that game. 26.1% from Utah from three.
Ooh.
And then the Cougars shot 40% from the free throw line. The Utes shot 53% from the free throw line. So, yeah, not a very good game from either end. But 73-72, I mean, that's still a fairly high-scoring game.
It's still a good scoring game for college. But like I said, I think right now with BYU riding as high as they are, right, 7 straight, this is a Utah team who has been fighting tough and fighting well, but obviously entering this one in different circumstances than they were in that first game that was here at the Huntsman Center. Like I said, BYU is going to want some revenge. BYU is going to want to go out there and not only, finish their season strong, but of course not get the season sweep from their rival.
Yeah, you don't want to get swept by your rival. You want to show that you have improved since that last outing, and I truly believe, it's obvious that BYU has all across the board. I mean, from Yegor Demeen, Richie Saunders, all those guys, they've gotten a lot better. Meanwhile, the Utes, you don't know what's going on in their minds. They got a lot on their minds, not knowing what next season is going to look like, not knowing what the next month is going to look like. So that's got to be hard to mentally prepare for that game. But I do really like that it's the last game of the season. I think that's cool. And unfortunately, not this season. The Utes are not fighting for tourney seeding, So in the future, I'm looking forward to that. If they do decide to keep one of these rivalry games for the last game of the season, I think that could be awesome. Seeding on the line.
I think they should.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
Yeah, just have the final game be,
But regardless, whatever's going on with both of these teams, I think it's going to be a fun game. I'm excited. I think it's going to be cool. And it's a late night tip-off, 8 p.m. at the Marriott Center. So.
And again, I think for both sides, right, next week you get into the Big 12 Conference Tournament. I think for both sides, you wanna walk into that tournament with a little bit of confidence, with some more wins under your belt, truly, especially for Utah, right? They just lost to West Virginia. If they lose tonight, you're heading into that tournament with 2 straight losses.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't bode well, but for BYU to go on this win streak, if they fall to Utah tonight, that might sting a little bit heading into that tournament. And so you want to end the regular season on a positive note. You want to end that with the win and carry that momentum into what should be a really, really fun basketball week next week in the Big 12 when everybody's down in Kansas for that tournament.
Hopefully the weather's good.
Yeah, hopefully no blizzards. Hopefully no one gets stuck in well, at least it's not Ames, Iowa.
I guess.
I don't think there's I literally don't think there's anything to do in Ames, Iowa. But
so the championship of the Big 12 tournament is next Saturday afternoon. So we'll be able to preview that a little bit. I'm thinking Houston will be there. And then on the other side, you've got BYU, you've got Iowa State, you've got Arizona. You never know who could get hot, I would guess. But do you have any predictions for who the Big 12 championship game will be between?
You know what, man? Well, I think as things stand right now, I think BYU and Iowa State will be.
Texas Tech is really good too, by the way.
Texas Tech is having a phenomenal season. I'm going to say I think Houston will be there regardless. Houston is a juggernaut. Houston is a national contender. I think Houston will be there. Can Arizona be there? Who knows? I kind of like Iowa State, man.
Okay.
I kind of like Iowa State. Look, I know BYU just beat them in double overtime.
Ruffling some feathers.
Yeah, look. Iowa State, I think they'll learn a lot from that double overtime loss against BYU. And if they can finish off the season with a win and head into that tournament with a little bit more confidence, Iowa State, they've been really, really good all season. I could see them making it to that to the final.
This opens up a whole other conversation that we don't necessarily have time for, but it's like, what's better for BYU to enter the NCAA tournament on a streak, or is it better for them maybe they lose a game, semifinals, and get some rest before the tourney, right? I think that is kind of overlooked as well, because if you make it all the way to the Big 12 championship game and then go right into the big tournament, like, that's a lot of basketball without much rest.
Yeah, but if you make it into the final, if you make it into the championship,
right, you could ride off of that.
That's a whole nother boost of confidence.
Yeah.
Especially for a BYU team that wasn't necessarily, they were expected to be good. I don't know if they were necessarily expected to be in that championship game at the start of the season.
Yeah. So I see both sides of the argument. So we'll see what ends up happening in Kansas. While we're here talking college hoops, gotta mention Utah State real quick. Couple of bad losses in a row for the Aggies. They lost at Boise State 82-65, and then at Colorado State 93-66. Uncharacteristic blowout losses for the Aggies. We had not seen that at all this season. They lost earlier in the year by 1 point by 2 points, at UNLV. They did struggle at home versus New Mexico, and then they had another close loss versus UC San Diego. So basically the last few losses for these Aggies, they've had some wins sprinkled in between them, but it feels like a bad time to fall apart for Utah State.
Yeah, that 93-66 loss to Colorado State, it's not good.
And the Boise State game, too, from the start, both of those losses, it got out of hand pretty quickly. And you could just tell, these guys didn't show up today. And it's tough because you put together such a good year. Again, a phenomenal job by Coach Jared Calhoun. You have, 25, 26 wins. And things are looking good. And then to just drop games, not only are you dropping games when you need a win, but you're dropping them big. Again, uncharacteristic blowout losses. Luckily, the Aggies, I shouldn't say luckily. That's a bad term to use, a bad way to put it. Fortunately, no, that's the same thing. On the bright side.
Yeah, there you go.
Utah State has a home game today, their senior night game. It's at home versus Air Force. Air Force only has one conference win on the year, I believe.
I think you're right, yes.
Yeah, one in 18 in conference. So knock on wood, should be a get-right game for the Aggies before the Mountain West tournament in Vegas.
I think my biggest concern right now for Utah State, obviously, and not to discredit Boise State or Colorado State, because they are good opponents. They're good teams. They're difficult teams to play against. But my biggest concern for Utah State is, are they fading out at the worst time possible?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like you put together such a special year, it seems like, and then it's, you're not a lock for the NCAA tournament yet. You're not a lock. So you cannot falter right here. You need a good performance in the conference tournament. You don't need to win it, but you need a good performance. And so it is very discouraging to see these two ugly losses. And again, there are two sides of the argument. Maybe you can say, well, that's going to motivate them going into Vegas, and we'll see. But you're right. It's a very bad time to drop two of your most important games of the season, because you got to remember, too, going back to that Boise State game, New Mexico had lost.
That's right.
So
the chance was there.
Boise State game, Utah State had the chance to win and be in a tie for the conference lead.
That's
and
right.
so knowing that they had that opportunity there and they weren't able to rise up to the occasion, it's one thing if you lose a close game at Boise State. That's understandable because the Broncos are a good program. But to know that the opportunity for the Aggies was there and they just completely no-showed, that puts a little bit of worry in my mind.
And I mean, look, at the bottom line, at the end of the day, 24-6 on this season, like that's really good, considering Jared Calhoun's first year. There was a lot of questions to if they can replicate what they did last season. They have to an extent. It's been a solid season for Utah State, and I don't want to discredit that at all for them because it's been good. However, you're getting these blowout losses at not the most opportune time. Right, the tournament's next week. I think tonight's a perfect opportunity for a get-right game. You get that win against Air Force. You feel a little bit better heading into that tournament, and hopefully the Aggies can pick up some steam in Las Vegas.
Yeah, get some confidence going into Vegas. The Mountain West tournament is always really fun in Las Vegas. There's always some big games, real competitive from top to bottom. I mean, New Mexico, Colorado State, Utah State, Boise State, and San Diego State. I wouldn't be surprised if any of those 5 teams won the tournament.
Those are all
realistically. And then you throw in the 6th team right below them is UNLV, and they play in Vegas, right? So it's like that's 5 or 6 teams. That's half the league that could realistically win the tournament. So there's always a lot of fun games. Unfortunately, not all of those teams are going to make the NCAA tournament. Which is interesting because this year's kind of a down year. They're kind of cannibalizing each other at the top.
That's right.
I do wonder how many teams are going to get in. I think at least 2, maybe 3. I'd be surprised if 4 made it.
How much made it last year, man? It was some crazy number. It was like 6, right?
I think it was 6.
I think it was 6 from the Mountain West. So far this year, looking at some of the bracket projections, only 4 Mountain West teams are tabbed to make it in. Right now, this Utah State team, they're one of the last 4 in at the moment.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's what happens when you lose two huge games. That goes a lot into the schedule making and the bracketology and things like that. And Ken Pomeroy, obviously creator of KenPom.com, one of the leading analytics sites that they kind of use all that stuff when they're making the selections for the tournament. He was on DJ and PK earlier this week. No, he was on with Hans and Scotty earlier this week, and he was talking about some of these tourney odds. And obviously, a loss to Air Force today would do a lot of damage to Utah State.
Absolutely.
He said they're not quite locks. They need to have at least a solid performance in the Mountain West tournament. But if they do what they're expected to do, which is beat Air Force today and then win hopefully at least 2 games in Vegas, you're sitting pretty.
Before we wrap up, quick shout out to Utah Valley, who right now is currently a lock in the tournament.
Yeah, they won the WAC regular season title.
Yes, they did.
There's a lot of drama there. Have you been keeping up with that?
I haven't. No, I've been very much watching from a distance.
Basically, the WAC is falling apart. In essence.
Yeah, I could see it.
Utah Valley applied to join another
yes.
conference. Sounds like Utah Tech and SUU were trying to join the Big Sky. I don't know if the Big Sky will let SUU back in because the T-Birds left to go to the WAC. So it was interesting. That was interesting when I was down there. That all of that happened. SUU leaving the Big Sky happened while I was down there, and everybody there knew that it was a pretty big mistake. And at least the people I talked to, but not the people making the decision, obviously. And yeah, it hasn't worked out, and the WAC is on the verge of crumbling. And if that happens and the Big Sky doesn't let SUU back in, I don't know what they're going to do. So interesting kind of realignment.
Mid-major madness.
Yeah, mid-major madness and repercussions hitting the schools down south. But anyways, you're right. Shout out to Utah Valley for winning the WAC regular season title. So does that guarantee them a spot in the NCAA tournament, or do they have to win? I think they might have to win the WAC tournament, but at least that gives them the highest seed. And the regular season title, that's awesome because there's some pretty good programs there. GCU is a really good school. They won it last year.
They won, and GCU upset in a tournament last year.
Yeah, that's right.
They had an upset in the tournament last year. So Currently projected 14 on the latest bracketology. So
Utah Valley.
Utah Valley, and so I'll be excited to see if Utah Valley can make it into the tournament.
Hey, if
Support
we get
the locals.
If we get 3 schools in the NCAA tournament, that's always great.
That's a win for me.
No matter what 3 schools it is. Yeah.
That's a win. That's a win in my book.
So there
Go
we
Utah
go.
sports.
All right, Alex, let's hit a break. Coming up on the other side, should we go Jazz?
Let's do it, man.
Walker Kessler had a phenomenal game last night. We'll talk more about that next. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napolis with me. Thanks for joining us. Part of your Saturday morning. Had a little bit of breaking news last segment that we missed, but saw it during the break. A BYU women's coach, Amber Whiting, has stepped down. Not the greatest season for the Cougs. Trying to pull up for the women's team, by the way, trying to pull up their record.
13-17 on the season.
There were some reports coming out yesterday, but our guy Mitch Harper just saw him walking down the hallway, actually. He made it official. He didn't make it official. He tweeted that it was official. She has stepped down after kind of similar to Craig Smith, just not hitting the expectations there.
No, and I think, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I avidly follow BYU basketball or BYU women's basketball, but it could be said the same thing. It's an opportunity right now where BYU basketball is generating a lot of hype and it's generating a lot of excitement. And so it's a good opportunity for, the women's side to capitalize on that momentum and potentially grow their program. 13-17 on the season, not the best of years. You had an early exit in the Big 12 tournament, losing to UCF. Good time for a change.
Yeah.
Good time for a change.
All right, Alex, let's talk Utah Jazz basketball. We are celebrating these losses as they begin to pile up. 5, 6, 7, 8 losses in a row.
There you go.
It's awesome. Oh, wait, no, I was looking at the other end of the schedule. I was going to say that feels like 4 losses in a row. But the Jazz lost last night to the Raptors and 118-109. It was another one of those games where, the Raptors aren't far behind the Jazz as far as worst records in the league, right? So the Jazz had to sit a lot of guys. Larry Markkinen, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, Walker Kessler did play. Keontae George did play. But we got to talk Walker Kessler, man. He had a monster game. He almost broke the triple-double curse without racking up an assist. Walker Kessler had 18 points, 25 rebounds.
That's insane.
And 8 blocks. What?
The Utah Jazz last night in that loss of the Raptors, they had 56 rebounds. Walker Kessler is almost half of their rebounds. 25. 13 on the offensive side, 12 on the defensive side.
That's just dominant.
25 total.
Yeah.
Just you talk about a glass cleaner, man.
Yeah. Window washer. The sheriff.
And to put up 18 points to go along with it, what a phenomenal performance from Walker Kessler. And it's a conversation we've had here before, Christian. The step that he's taking.
He's a big, tough, nasty dude that you don't want to mess
with. It's so
with.
fun to see. It's so awesome to see. Look, it hasn't been the greatest of seasons for the Jazz as far as record goes, 15-48. But these young guys are playing, man. They're balling. Walker Kessler is a perfect example of that.
Yep.
Had the offseason the slump last season, and has come into this year rejuvenated, refreshed, and he's taken a big step forward in his game. He's having phenomenal performances. Last night it's like a cherry on top of the cake.
Kyle Filipowski off the bench had another good game, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists for him. He also added 2 steals, but 7 to 10 shooting, 2 of 4 from the 3-point line. There was a lot of talk throughout the week and some of the cuts we play on the station. Filipowski has really worked on his shot coming out of Duke in his rookie season, and it's showing on his shooting numbers. And he has really become a reliable shooter. And I don't think he's a traditional. I don't think his role in the NBA is at the 5. I think it's more of at the 4. Maybe he could get a role as kind of a John Collins 5. But He's got to get tougher on defense, and that's for sure. And I think that'll come. You got to remember he's only a rookie, right?
First year,
He's going to have flaws. That's why he fell to the second round, and he's a rookie. He's not going to be perfect. But to see the progress in his shooting numbers throughout his rookie season, at least offensively, you've got something there. And especially where he's finding consistency over the last several games now, again, that's encouraging. And that's somebody you picked up in the early second round. And so when the Jazz stack up on all these second-round picks and you say, oh, what are those going to do? I mean, yeah, Filipowski, the truth is his most likely outcome is a reliable role player. But guess what? If you can get that out of a second-round pick that you got for free, yeah, I'll take it.
If you can get a second-rounder to come off the bench and give you 17 points on a night?
Well, I don't think that's his role on, end-all, be-all when the Jazz are a contending team.
Right.
Maybe that's not his role, but again, we've seen John Collins take a big step this year.
That's true.
And part of that is because he's going against basically backups, right? If your backup is a fringe starter, he's probably better than the other team's backups. So I would say that Kyle Filipowski's his ceiling is John Collins. And again, on a contending team that probably looks a little bit different than what we're seeing right now, but that's at least valuable.
He's averaging 15 points and shooting 53% from three since the All-Star break.
Oh, that's really good.
That's pretty good.
And again, he's seeing a lot of playing time because the Jazz are having to sit a lot of people. But it's nice. That's what this is about, is letting the kids play. And again, he's got to get a lot better defensively because he's borderline unplayable on the defensive end. I mean, we saw him basically be a non-factor against Zion Williamson and the Pelicans, at least down low. But at least around the perimeter, I think he's got some upside there. I think he can move pretty well. He's got a good amount of athleticism. So he's an interesting player because he's big, but he's not thick and slow. He's an athletic big guy, so he's not a rim protector on the defensive end, but I think he could be an interesting sort of tool, kind of a unique hybrid sort of player. He's fun.
I see what you mean.
Cody Williams, 10 points.
Just about to bring him up.
4 of 8 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3. I used the word unplayable earlier when I was talking about Kyle Filipowski on the defensive end. Cody Williams was in that same conversation throughout the year, but even on offense, it was hard to have him on the floor at all. But again, since All-Star break, we've seen Cody Williams start to slowly make his presence felt.
His shooting since the All-Star break has been improved. Now shooting, since the All-Star break, 41% from the floor and a 41% from three.
That's really good. The three-point shooting was a big question for Cody coming out of college. His percentage was good, but he didn't have a lot of volume there. So there were some questions about if that high shooting percentage really meant anything. But it's nice to see that he can back it up at the NBA level. And obviously he's not going to be a sharp shooter, but if it's a guy that, if he gets an open look, a semi-contested look, you can trust it's going to go in. You're not going to be like, oh, why is that guy taking that shot? So that's encouraging. I like, again, these games, especially these recent games against other bad teams like the Wizards and Raptors, where the Jazz are having to sit dang near everybody. That's a great opportunity for these young guys to get out on the floor and really just learn what they have to do. And earlier in the season, I had a lot of questions about what good that would do if you're just losing all these games, and what's the point? And that's probably harmful to the young players, but I'm kind of seeing it right now.
So far, it's been the opposite, man.
Yeah,
so far, I think it's been the opposite.
I'm seeing the vision, so I like it.
Every time the Jazz play, I like to, take a gander over at the Tankathon standings and see where everything falls. And now there's a pretty sizable gap now between the Jazz and the Raptors, man. 21-42 for Toronto. Jazz sitting at 15-48.
It was a great loss for the Jazz.
It's a phenomenal loss. Plus, Toronto's on a 3-game win streak.
Yeah. So Right now, the Raptors have the 5th worst record in the league. New Orleans is still at 4, and then the top 3 remains the same: Washington, Charlotte, and Utah, respectively.
You remember when we said no one's going to catch the Wizards?
Yeah.
Charlotte and Utah right there.
I still don't think it's going to happen. I think the
Charlotte's
Jazz
a game and a half back.
I think the Jazz got lucky losing to Washington the other day. I believe they play again coming up here pretty soon.
I think they do, yes.
I don't think the Jazz are going to lose twice
Hey,
to Washington.
it could happen.
But yeah, regardless, that loss to Toronto was big. Got to keep losing. The Jazz play Washington again on March 19th. They play Charlotte again on March 31st. So those are 2 big games as far as really, really try and lose those if you can. If the Jazz were to lose both of those games and continue to lose down the stretch, you could be looking at the Jazz moving up to number 2 in the Tankathon standings, which would be awesome. But some interesting, I don't know.
Charlotte's in a weird
They
weird
suck,
spot.
dude.
Yeah,
They're bad.
They're in a weird spot.
1-9 in their last 10 games.
Lost 9 straight, dude.
And some of those losses, I mean, I saw a stat. It was like the largest margin of victory combined in like 2 or 3 games. Because they got blown out 3 games in a row. They're really bad. And the thing with Charlotte is they're losing, like they're not sitting their guys. They're not sitting their good players. LaMelo Ball is out there shooting 30 shots a game.
But I mean, aside from LaMelo, like who else is there?
Well, they had Brandon Miller last year.
Oh, that's right.
In the draft. Right. Miles Bridges is a good player. They've got talent. They just suck. Like the talent is there.
Yes.
But they're not able to win. It's a bad organization, which this was something that came up earlier in the week. DeMarcus Cousins was talking about, if I'm Cooper Flagg, I'm going to the Jazz or I'm going back to Duke. Because
I absolutely agree.
The Wizards, bad organization. Hornets, bad organization. The Jazz at least have some history. They're bad now, but we've seen them have, in the last 25 years, they've had basically 3 separate eras where they were borderline contenders or contenders. So we know the Jazz can do it. And obviously it's different ownership now and different everything. Things are a lot different, but I wouldn't think that, if the Jazz end up with the number 1 pick, I wouldn't worry about them screwing it up. Whereas with the Wizards, and this is a conversation we literally had off air, it's like, if Cooper Flagg goes to the Wizards, he's done.
I can't see him having success in Washington.
No.
Just because there's...
Nobody does.
I mean, the Washington is down to the bare bones, man. They've traded everybody away.
They're not a good franchise.
Bad organization. Charlotte, bad organization. New Orleans, bad organization.
Yeah.
I would throw them in there, too. You look at the top 5 teams, maybe Toronto could be decent. I think the Jazz would be, obviously, maybe a little biased, but I think it would be a good fit.
Yeah.
Like Boogie Cousins said.
Yeah, so I thought that was a good take. It was interesting to hear... somebody who has some cachet. Obviously, he's not necessarily a medium member, but he had a good career in the NBA. At one point, he was one of the most dominant players in the league. So it's interesting to hear that sort of take is like, Utah is the place because so often you hear, you wouldn't want to go there. Nobody wants to go to Utah. So that was cool.
And didn't he say on some Hornets pregame or postgame show?
No, I doubt it was that. It wasn't that, was it?
I don't know.
It was some... media thing. I think it was for NBA.com, maybe.
Gotcha. I thought it was for the Hornets. So for him to
that would be funny.
For him to go onto the Hornets, station or whatever and say that'd be hilarious.
So regardless, the Jazz have a couple of good losses in a row, which feels weird to talk about, but here we are. That's what we have become. We're liking these losses, man. Next up for the Jazz, they're going to be at Philadelphia Sunday, March 9th. Philadelphia, another team struggling. Joel Embiid, he's done for the rest of the year. The 76ers, by the way, their pick is top 6 protected. And if it falls outside of the top 6, it goes to OKC. So the 76ers are another team that they really want to lose because that would be a huge mistake, sending the 7th overall pick to Oklahoma City.
Well, didn't Paul George come back to win championships?
That's what he said, but yeah, I'm with you there. It's hard to do that.
It's hard to do that when you're.
It's hard to do that when you're one of the worst teams. You're 21-41 right now for Philly. So yeah, that's next up for the Jazz. That's coming tomorrow.
Hopefully they can, continue picking up these losses, man.
Utah.
Yeah, continue to position yourself in a spot where you have the highest odds at that lottery pick. We talk about it every week. Stay in the top 3.
It's all about the ping pong balls, man.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm trying to look to see if there's any sort of injury report out for tomorrow's game. Probably not quite yet. While we're talking basketball, though, did you see Jokic's stat line from last night?
First ever player to do, 30-20-20?
30, 20, and 20.
Incredible.
That's ridiculous.
Incredible. I think the MVP race is going to come down to the wire, man.
Let's hit MVP. We'll hit MVP race next segment. We'll briefly mention that. Probably 11:30.
Let's do it.
Coming up next, though, let's do technical fouls. Another Chiefs player has been arrested, and then we've got some beef in the NBA media. We'll hit those next. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Here for the Hercules Hero of the Week at KSLSports.com.
If you're coming from the street with dirty shoes on your feet, that's a technical foul. If you switch the radio to some modern music show, that's a technical foul. If you touch the thermostat,
You'll get hit with a bat.
'cause that's a technical foul.
You will feel my wrath.
That's a technical foul.
Personal foul, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
A technical foul.
Welcome back to the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, joined by Alex Napolis. As always, thank you for making us a part of your weekend. Good weekend so far. Hopefully the weather picks up. I'm ready for spring.
I am too, man.
I was not a fan of the snow yesterday.
I didn't like that snowfall yesterday.
Yeah.
Then people were sliding off the freeway.
Yeah, there were a lot of accidents.
It's not a good time, man.
It is time for technical fouls. This segment, of course, we like to talk about some of the funnier or more stupid or ridiculous things that happen in sports. Because there's a lot of idiots out there. Speaking of idiots, I'll start things off. I'll go Xavier Worthy. This morning, breaking news. Chiefs wide receiver Xavier Worthy was arrested for domestic violence, it sounds like. So scary situation, and it's sickening. The Chiefs had another receiver get arrested last year. I hate this. I hate this part of the NFL, and I don't think that, that's representative of who these guys are. But unfortunately, there are too many of these athletes that do this sort of thing, and we don't know all the details, but they do this and they get away with it, and they're able to continue with their career. So that's absolutely sickening. We don't know what's going to happen with Xavier Worthy, but that was breaking news this morning. So thought I would mention that. Not cool.
And to clarify, we're not saying that it's a technical foul to do what he did, because it's a very serious charge.
Right.
But it's becoming a recurring theme for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
Where their players are in trouble with the law.
I saw a graphic that said over the last, I don't know what it was, like 10 years or something, but the Chiefs lead the NFL in players arrested.
See, that's not good.
No, it's like I said, and a lot of these are very serious things, and most of them don't seem to face any sort of repercussion.
The situation last year with
Rashee Rice has still not been suspended for.
Yeah, man.
What was he doing? He was racing and he crashed a car.
And there was paraphernalia found in his in his vehicle while all that was happening.
Yeah, and no repercussions.
119 miles per hour.
And he fled the scene.
And he fled the scene.
That was another big thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was last year, and then on to this year. So, again, that was breaking news this morning. That's why I wanted to bring that up. What else you got, Alex?
This one's probably a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit.
We can actually joke about it.
We can actually joke about it. What's going on with Charles Barkley, man? On Thursday night,
he's a grumpy old guy.
He is a grumpy old guy, but I love it. On Thursday night, I wish we could play the audio, but it's like a 3-minute rant about Charles Barkley going off on Kendrick Perkins from ESPN.
Who nobody likes.
Yes, I will agree on that part. But he's going after ESPN and Kendrick Perkins about their coverage of the NBA. He's tired of their love for LeBron. He's tired of the way that they're just talking. Because earlier in the week, Kendrick Perkins and Stephen A. had a conversation about how the Lakers are saving the NBA.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are we talking about?
Lakers are 8-game win streak. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games, and they have shot up to second place in the Western Conference standings. But you're right. I think that's what ESPN, with their big talk shows, First Take, and I don't even know what Kendrick Perkins is on. But it seems like that's what they do. They're very reactionary, and that's what sports media is sometimes. I mean, I've done that before. So it is very reactionary to be like, oh, yeah, they saved the NBA. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Well, and they even had a conversation about how the LeBron and MJ debate is over, and they had a whole show about LeBron and Michael Jordan, that conversation of the GOAT. And Charles Barkley was like, what are we doing? Like, OKC and the Cavs have been incredible all season, and nobody's talking about them.
Because, they don't get views. It's L.A., it's New York. Those are the teams that are always talked about because so many people live in those cities. So many people are fans of those teams. That's what gets the most views. And it sucks that it's like that, but that's how it is.
And I think that the thing that makes this the best and the thing that makes this great is the fact that Charles Barkley is like, I want to talk about the other idiots on the other network.
Yeah.
And goes and berates Kendrick Perkins and Stephen A., truthfully.
Well, and we got to remember, too, they're going to be working for ESPN next year.
And he said it.
Chuck mentioned that.
He's like, we're going to be the fools on that network next year. We're working alongside them.
So that's funny. Kendrick Perkins had a stupid tweet basically telling Charles Barkley to say it to his face and whatever.
He said, might want to tell that senior citizen Charles Barkley that I'll be around. When he see an idiot or fool in person, make sure he keep that same energy. He can come playing with me if he want, and I'ma address him like the numbers on a house. Straight from the 409 homeboy. And
all right,
bar none and fade all.
All right. Yeah, he's annoying. I've always stayed away from even paying attention to what Kendrick Perkins says. Yeah, it's silly. I do think it's funny when media members beef, though. Going back to last week with Jordan Schultz and Ian Rappaport, I think it's funny.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it's just sports, guys. Like, seriously, calm down.
The Jordan Schultz situation is awesome, too, because these guys were about to square up in a Starbucks. And now you have Charles Barkley and Kendrick Perkins taking shots at each other over their NBA coverage.
Yeah. It's silly. And then this leads into a little bit to some related instances to that. There was a video of basically LeBron James in Stephen A. Smith's face, and some wonderful lip readers out there said they were reading LeBron James's lips, and LeBron James was telling Stephen A. to leave Bronny out of this. And it's like, LeBron, this is your fault. Like, what do you gave this to Bronny. You handed all of this to Bronny. You can't hide him from scrutiny anymore. He's a big boy. He is an adult now. He is in the NB freaking A.
That is true.
You cannot protect him from the talking heads. If you force the Los Angeles Lakers, the most storied franchise in the NBA, to draft your Nepo baby, you can't get mad when people are talking about him poorly. Because he doesn't live up to the expectations that you set when you said Bronny was better than half these cats in the NBA. That is your fault, LeBron.
I couldn't agree more.
So at some point, he's going to have to stop being this protective dad. And I get it. You want what's best for your kid. But at the same time, again, this is the NBA. Like, this is not some AAU little kids tournament where you can be like, hey, don't talk about my kid like that. He's not a kid anymore.
He's in the NBA.
He's in the NBA.
He's one of the other guys.
And guess what, LeBron? This is your fault. But he's never going to realize that.
But I think it's interesting too that like this whole situation has brought up Kevin Love is now going after Stephen A.
Yeah.
And trying to defend Bronny. You also have Draymond Green, who Stephen A. says they're no longer speaking because of the comments he made about Bronny. And then
Stephen A. is no longer speaking with Draymond?
No, Draymond's no longer speaking to Stephen A. It's the other way. It's the other way around.
Okay.
And then you have Bronny James commenting on Stephen A.'s Instagram post saying,
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Funny how the ones who couldn't hoop got the most to say.
All right. Well, 5 years, $100 million for Stephen A. Whether you like him or not, he gets paid a lot of money to do this. It's his job. And you know what your job is, Bronny? To be a basketball player. And you know what Steven's job is? To talk about basketball players.
It's been an interesting couple weeks in NBA media, man.
It's funny.
It's weird how, I guess, the discourse of that's been happening the last.
It's because they need this to
weeks.
save their ratings.
I guess so, man. I guess so.
Yeah. We'll see. All right, we got to take a break. Coming up next, we'll talk Utah Hockey Club and the NHL wildcard race. Can the Clubbies make the playoffs? The NHL trade deadline was yesterday. There were some big moves made. We'll get into that a little bit next. This is the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back to the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napolis with me as always. It's time to talk some hockey, Alex. The NHL trade deadline was yesterday. Utah Hockey Club, not major players. They did make a trade that came in after the deadline had closed. Nothing major. They traded away, I'm spacing the name, She is his last name. But basically he was a player that has been retired unofficially for a few years. Shea Weber. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Sean. Shea Weber. He had been retired for a few years. And when they were the Coyotes, they picked up his contract basically to help out another team with salary cap space. So the Utah Hockey Club were paying $7 million to Mr. Shea Weber. And anyways, the hockey club traded his contract away to the Blackhawks, because the Blackhawks have to meet the salary cap floor next year. So basically the hockey club got a free 5th-round pick. And I like this move because I compared it to what the Jazz did at the NBA trade deadline. Just picking up free assets. That's why you do that. That's why you pick up these contracts where you're just paying a player for being retired, right? When the Coyotes were in the situation they were in a couple of years ago, they were trading everybody away and picking up all these bad contracts and in a rebuilding phase. Now that's starting to pay off, and I know it's only a 5th-round pick, but it's like, hey, every step helps, right?
And I think more importantly, for this move for the Utah Hockey Club, you open up $7 million in cap.
Right, that frees up $7 million in cap space. The club is supposed to have
17.8.
I thought I saw 22. Regardless,
No. I mean for the move that they made.
Oh, okay.
For the move that they made, they opened up $17.8 million in cap.
So they're gonna have some money to play with.
A lot of money.
Whatever,
to play with.
yeah. Well, they're gonna have money to play with, and now Logan Cooley is going to need an extension. I'm excited to see what that contract looks like because he's gonna get paid, and it's gonna be a long contract. Hoping he stays here in Utah for a very long time. But even after extending Cooley, they are going to be able to make a splash in free agency if they want. And we'll see. And I say if they want because they sat out of the Mikko Rantanen sweepstakes. He was kind of the big name to watch yesterday at the trade deadline. Utah was a team that had been tied to Mikko Rantanen. He was, of course, a longtime player with the Avs. He's got a couple. He has 2 100-point seasons to his name. He's a phenomenal player. Couple of 40-goal seasons. Really, really good player, but he ultimately ended up with the Dallas Stars. He was traded twice in the last 2 months, by the way. That was interesting. I didn't know the NHL could do that. Other leagues have rules against that. A player can't be traded multiple times.
Right. Yep.
But anyways, Rantanen, he goes from Colorado to Carolina to Dallas in a matter of 2 months. But Dallas is extending Rantanen. And now the Dallas Stars, they look like contenders for the Stanley Cup.
You know who else is really geared up?
Who's that?
The Florida Panthers.
Oh, my gosh. And sorry to to bury on Sean. The Florida Panthers picking up Brad Marchand. That's a big get. This is a guy who was a captain for the Bruins. Thought he was a lifer. He was like 24 points away from 1,000 career points with the Bruins, I believe. So he's a franchise legend.
Let's check in with our local Bruins fan here in the studio, Sean Croshaw.
I'm down bad.
Down bad.
You didn't have a good day yesterday, buddy.
Yesterday was rough. The trade deadline happened at 1. It was supposed to end, and the news came out at 1:05.
Yeah,
so I thought I was in the clear 5 minutes. I was like, oh, we're good. And then Heartbreak City.
Sean, I obviously can't blame me. I don't keep up with Boston Bruins rumors. Was this a move that people had kind of seen coming? Like, was there speculation that Boston could move on from Mr. Marchand here at the trade deadline, or was this like a complete shock?
It was a shock to me. There was rumors within the last 2-3 days before the trade deadline, but it just sounded like
to Florida or just
No.
in general?
Most of those were to somewhere on the west, like Colorado or LA. But yeah, nobody ever mentioned Florida. But I guess management talked with him. They're trying to renegotiate an extension with him. They didn't come to terms, and so they talked to him about moving him, and he mentioned Florida as one of his destinations.
Oof. All right, well, we'll see how the Panthers look. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk, they put him on long-term IR. He has an injury from the Four Nations face-off, so he is out the remainder of the regular season. But
That's right.
come playoffs, the Panthers are definitely going to be contenders. Obviously, defending Stanley Cup champions anyway, so they were already going to be good. But yeah, this is a big get for them. Let's focus in on the Utah Hockey Club, though. They're coming off a 4-3 overtime loss last night to the Chicago Blackhawks. That one kind of stung because that's a team that Utah should have beat. This is a team they've beat twice already, and with the wild card race being how it is, I mean, they need every point. I don't think that's a stretch. And so it's nice to get the 1 point in the overtime loss, but overall, it definitely feels like they left 2 points on the board here.
Absolutely. And I was looking at the Discord last night on social media about this loss. You know, everybody was talking about it's a loss, but you still get the point out of it. But when you play the Chicago Blackhawks, who are a team that
20-35-8, by the way,
you should be,
it's a bad team.
You should be beating them.
Yeah,
you should be winning. And unfortunately, they didn't. Game goes to overtime. You lose in overtime. You still get the point, but man, the opportunity was there for 2, and that ultimately, I think, is what you want, and especially with how close the race is, right? Anaheim is right behind the hockey club. Still have a ways to go as far as the standing goes. Still has a lot of ground to make up, but I mean, they're still in the conversation. Then you have 2 points between you and St. Louis. You have 2 points between you and Calgary. Then you got 3 points between you and Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver right now currently holds that second wild card spot. Nobody's going to catch the first wild card team, whether that's the Wild or the Avalanche. Those teams are in the upper 70s of points right now. But the second wild card spot, Vancouver currently holds 69 points. Calgary's right there with 68. St. Louis also has 68, and then Utah has 66 points. So it is a very, very close race. Utah still plays Vancouver and Calgary, wrapping up the year. Those games are in a little while still. But the big thing for me with this Chicago loss, it's like if you want to be a playoff team, you've got to beat these. You know, you need to win the games that you're supposed to win.
Absolutely.
And so this one feels kind of like a gut punch, even though there's still a lot of hockey left to be played. Similar to the Aggies, right? We talked about in the first segment the Aggies losing games to Boise State and Colorado State when they needed wins there. It's disappointing, and it's not a good feeling. But this is not backbreaking by any means for the club.
No,
because still a lot of hockey.
No, it's not backbreaking, but I mean every point matters.
Yeah,
every point counts, and the fact that you don't come away with 2 against Chicago, it sets you behind. And I mean, you were already coming into the night behind 3 points behind that wild card line. You could have made up some ground. You could have been, a point behind St. Louis and a point behind Calgary, but instead you're 2, and you're ultimately 3 behind Vancouver. And we're just down to that point of the season where every point is important. Every point matters. Every point counts. You need all the points you can get to take it to overtime against a team like Chicago, a team, as we mentioned, you should be beating. It's a little disappointing.
Yeah. Although they sat out the trade deadline for the most part, they did get busy with some contract extensions. Olimata was given a 3-year deal. Ian Cole, Kevin Stenlund, I believe, were given 1-year deal.
Kerfoot.
Oh, Alexander Kerfoot. You're right.
Kerfoot, yeah.
1-year deals. And then, of course, Veggie, 5-year contract extension for their new top goalie. It seems Veggie has started the last several games between the pipes for Utah, and I like the move. Statistically, he's been a top 10 goalie in the NHL this season, and he's been really good, especially against Detroit. He had, it was 37. He's had 37 of 39.
39, man.
That's really, really good. So it's nice to see him obviously rewarded for his efforts there. It's a 5-year deal for around $5 million per year, slightly less. I always am wary in any sport. We're still learning hockey. That's no surprise. But in any sport, I'm always a little wary of rewarding a player immediately when the body of work isn't there, right? This is Veggie's first really good season. So you wonder how long this play is going to continue to improve. And so the length of the contract, 5 years, that's a pretty long commitment. But what I do like, $5 million a year sounds like kind of a lot right now, but I think the NHL salary cap is about to explode. It's about to go higher than we've ever thought of it being, right? So by the time the end of this 5-year contract comes, let's say Veggie doesn't work out. Let's say he's not their starting goalie. By the time, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th years of that contract comes around, that $5 million number, that's going to be what backup goalies are making anyways.
Could be, yeah, you're right.
It could be.
Could be.
Maybe not quite, but still. But regardless, again, shouldn't talk like that probably because Veggie is having a really good year.
How dare you
and
curse him?
He's been awesome, and I'm glad that he's there.
How dare you?
It's nice to take care of your guys. And it's nice. You know what was awesome, too? He had a wonderful sound bite the other day. He said, "I desire to be in Utah." That's music to our ears. When have we ever heard that from a professional athlete?
I think Clarkson said that maybe a couple times.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear it again. We don't hear it too often.
We don't. We really don't. And I think ultimately, look, you don't make any moves at the trade deadline as far as going out, bringing, guys in. But you lock down some important veterans for, another year. You lock down Olimata, who I think has come in and has done a really well job after being traded to.
Oh, he's been great. He was a great pickup.
And so you stick around. He's going to stick around for a little bit, and then you have Vejmelka, who I think has quickly become a fan favorite. 1,
yeah,
and 2 has been incredibly solid this season. So you make those moves to take care of the guys that you have currently in the locker room. You to keep them around for for a little bit longer, and you ultimately reward the guys you have in the locker room now for what they're bringing to this team. And obviously it seems like a lot of the players are happy to be here. A lot of the players are excited to be with this new organization, with this new team. And you also set yourself up, right, with the move that you did make, you set yourself up for what could be a pivotal offseason for the Utah Hockey Club, right? Whether you make the playoffs or not, they're geared up right now to
continue taking steps forward.
To continue taking steps forwards and make some important decisions in the offseason on bringing in, whether you decide to make a big swing for a free agent or just something that can ultimately, with the growth of your young guys, adding a little bit more to ultimately get you over that line and compete in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I think the Olimata extension was really good. And I think that's another reason we've heard people talk about kind of why they sat out the trade deadline. They could have, if they really wanted to, they could have taken a big swing. But they're not quite there where they want to do that because it's not guaranteed they're going to make the playoffs, so it's not quite worth it. But also, when Sean Durzi went down early on in the year and then you trade for Olimata, That's kind of your trade deadline right there. That's the big trade for you. And so you secure somebody like Mata, who, by the way, has exceeded expectations since that trade. And then you get Sean Dursey back, you get Logan Cooley back, you get Dylan Gunther back. These guys all missed significant time with injuries. It's like you are adding players without having to add players. So it was a quiet day yesterday as far as not making any moves, but the Utah Hockey Club has already made their moves.
And they're like I said, they're in a position to, obviously right now they're in this tight playoff race. Can they make it? Won't they won't they make it? Doesn't matter if they do or don't, but you're set up perfectly for what's to come, next year, 2 years, 3 years, and going forward.
Next up for the Utah Hockey Club, they get tonight and tomorrow night off. They will be back in Salt Lake City on Monday at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's another tough part about the loss last night. It was the second night of a road back-to-back. They were at Detroit on Thursday, then at Chicago on Friday. So, yeah, back-to-backs are always tough. On the road makes it a little tougher no matter who you're playing against. So it's going to be nice to have these guys back in Salt Lake City. That Toronto game is huge. I think there's going to be some juice there at the Delta Center.
All next week is big for this team.
Toronto currently 38-21-3. They are second place in the Atlantic Division, so they are firmly a playoff team. But I think it's going to be a good game there.
You get Toronto on Monday. You have Anaheim on Wednesday. Seattle on Friday. At Seattle on Friday. And then you go up Sunday to Vancouver.
Yep, at Vancouver. That's the biggest game of the month.
It's a huge game.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to take care of business heading up to that Vancouver game, but I think, I think we'll have a better idea of if this team is going to or is not going to make the playoffs with this upcoming week, right? Because you have Anaheim and you play Vancouver.
Yeah.
Those are two teams that you're battling for that second wild spot. Well, wild card spot right now.
Do yourselves a lot of favors there. All right, let's take a break. Coming up next, there was a pretty significant NFL trade that happened yesterday. We'll get into that next. This is the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back to the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, joined by Alex Napolis. As always, thanks for making us a part of your Saturday morning. Hope you have wonderful plans for your weekend. I know I do. I get to sit here and talk about sports.
We get to sit here and talk about Geno Smith.
Yesterday, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Seattle Seahawks involved in I thought this was funny. Some people were calling it a blockbuster trade. I don't know if it quite fits the bill for that, but Seattle sends quarterback Geno Smith to the Raiders for a third-round pick. One detail I thought was funny, this is the third-round pick that the Raiders received from the Jets in the Davante Adams trade. So the Raiders essentially traded Geno Smith. They essentially traded Davante Adams for Geno Smith. Straight up.
Which, look, ultimately, I don't not like the move for the Raiders, right? I think Geno Smith is definitely a step up from Gardner Minshew, and he's definitely a step up from Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, I get that, but it's like, why would you want to? He's 34. So it's not like they're trading for some young quarterback. Like, by the time the Raiders get good, they're not going to get good fast. By the time they get good, Geno Smith's going to be old and out of the league. And I think he's average at best anyways.
Well, and he could be a good bridge guy for you for the next 2 to 3 years while you figure out.
If they had a young guy, but they don't, is the funny
exactly.
thing. And if they have, they have the number 6 pick in the draft this year. So now it's like, okay, what is your goal? Did you send a third-round pick away for a bridge quarterback? Because if that's the case, that's expensive. Did you send a third-round pick away to try to build around Geno Smith? Okay, if that's the case, then you're probably going to take Ashton Genty or a receiver 6th overall. But then what's going to happen in 5 years when Geno Smith isn't good? Or in 2 years when Geno Smith turns out to not be a good player anyways? I don't know. I think it's an interesting trade. I kind of like it for Seattle's side. Maybe I'm biased. I've never been a fan of Geno Smith. I think he had one really good year with the Seahawks and then a couple of mediocre years. And we'll see. I do like the reunion with Pete Carroll, though.
See, and I'm the opposite of you, bro. I like it for the Raiders. I don't know if I like it for Seattle.
How come?
What is Seattle doing?
Rebuilding?
You're going full rebuild.
Right. Well, so they cut Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf traded. He has requested a trade, so you're probably going to get at least a second-round pick for DK Metcalf. They're asking a first and a third. They're not going to get that much because the other team would have to give a new deal. So that's a lot to ask. But regardless, it is a tough spot. It's not the perfect way to rebuild. But I think the Seahawks realized that they weren't close to competing where they were at, so it's time to just start over, I guess.
I think for the Raiders, you answer your biggest question coming into the offseason. Who's going to be quarterback?
Yeah.
Who's your quarterback? What's going to happen at the quarterback position? You get some answers there, trading for Geno Smith. Now for the Seahawks, right, you mentioned Tyler Lockett. You mentioned DK. Their offensive coordinator was fired. Ryan Grubb was fired in the offseason.
He was bad.
You still have Jackson Smith and Jigba, which I think is a phenomenal piece.
He's good.
He's a very good piece. But you don't. What's your plan now at quarterback?
Yeah.
Right? You have Sam Howell on the roster, but let's be honest, Sam Howell.
So I saw some reports this morning that they're going to go all in on Sam Darnold.
Yeah. Do you take a swing at Darnold? Do you take a swing at Justin Fields?
Yeah. It sounds like Sam Darnold. So it's like a domino effect. So Sam Darnold is the Seahawks. That's who they want to go after once free agency opens. It opens on Wednesday, but technically the legal tampering period begins on Monday. So that's when you'll see deals start to trickle in. So it sounds like the Seahawks are going to go after Darnold, which we'll see how that goes. So that would mean the Vikings could potentially be in for Aaron Rodgers.
I was just about to say that.
That's what the news was on the social media this morning. Saw some multiple reporters saying that. So sounds like that's the plan for those teams. I wouldn't trust going all in on Sam Darnold if I were anybody, whether it was the Seahawks or the Vikings. He had a good first 3 quarters of the season for Minnesota last year, but he really fell apart in their final 2 games.
The lights got too bright.
Very much so. But anyways, Seahawks are in a weird spot because I guess free agent quarterbacks, it's Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields. It's slim pickings out there. I wouldn't trust any of those guys to be a franchise quarterback. So it's going to be interesting.
I think Sam Darnold would be a good fit in Seattle.
I think that would be his best fit besides Minnesota.
Starting fresh.
Yeah.
Right? It's a new, and then plus you already have.
I would definitely want to go there over either of the New York teams.
Yes. 100%.
Or Cleveland.
I kind of hope Aaron Rodgers lands at the Giants, man.
See, I don't.
I think it'd be funny.
You hope for comedy's sake.
Yeah, for comedy's sake.
For Aaron Rodgers' sake, that would be a horrible move.
It would be a horrible move.
Because the Giants are one of the worst franchises ever besides the Jets.
I think if you're Aaron Rodgers, you end up with the Giants, you don't even have to move.
Right.
You just stay where you are. You just switch your colors.
I guess.
Yeah. You just
What's funny too is there was a clip when they were on the Hard Knocks. There was a Giants player talking trash to Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers said something like, "I've never even heard of you" or something. So that would be funny.
Well, hey, buddy, he's gonna be your teammate now.
So yeah, next Saturday show we'll have some big NFL news to talk about. We'll see if DK Metcalf gets traded. The Chargers released Joey Bosa, multiple-time Pro Bowler. That was a big move, 9-year vet. He has said in the past that he wants to play with his brother Nick in San Francisco. I don't know the logistics of that. We'll see what happens there. That would be cool, though. I always was sad that J.J. Watt never teamed up with T.J. I thought that would have been fun.
Well, I mean, everyone's always talking about J.J. coming back.
Oh, that's not going to happen. Too far gone there. But, yeah, Joey Bosa, a good player when he's healthy, but, man, he really struggles to stay healthy. And
that is true.
Now it sounds like the Chargers are working on an extension for Khalil Mack. So big move there. That frees up like $23 million in cap space for the Chargers ahead of free agency. Any other moves you're on the lookout for?
Currently, no. I do want to mention Max Crosby 3-year extension.
Oh, yeah.
For $106.5 million.
Highest paid non-quarterback ever.
And I think that's great. He's probably the best piece the Raiders have at the moment. He's probably the best player the Raiders have at the moment, and so you want to build around Max, and I think that's a fantastic deal for Crosby.
Yeah, so now it's like, okay, are the Raiders trying to go all in right away, because Geno Smith is 34. So, I mean, they're clearly the worst team in that division, with the Chiefs, Broncos, and Chargers all being playoff teams last year. It's going to be an uphill battle if the Raiders want to try and make the playoffs right away. So that's the part that doesn't really make sense to me. It feels like if you're the Raiders, by the time you actually build a playoff caliber roster, Geno Smith is going to be on his way out. But we'll see. Again, the Raiders pick 6th overall in the draft. That definitely puts them in play for whether it's Ashton Ginty or one of the top receivers like Tet McMillan or Travis Hunter, depending on what he wants to do. We'll see. That's an interesting move for the Raiders. I could see it backfiring. I could. Maybe that's just bias talking.
The Texans acquiring Christian Kirk.
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting...
I'm just curious what happens to Diggs.
Well, the Jaguars cut everybody.
Yes.
So that was funny. Diggs, I don't know if he's going to be brought back now. He's a free agent coming off a torn ACL. He's definitely past his prime. So, yeah, maybe Houston does bring him back, because we talked like last week, Tank Dell's probably going to miss the whole year. So maybe Diggs comes back as the theoretical third wide receiver. But, I mean, Nico Collins is your guy. And then Christian Kirk is a solid number 2, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, if you're Houston, you probably don't want to spend a lot of free agent money to bring Stephon Diggs back. So, yeah, he probably goes elsewhere. Maybe Dallas or something. Dallas freed up a lot of cap space.
Oh, yeah, they restructured
some contracts there. So
yep, CD and Dak.
Much needed for the Cowboys.
I don't know what the Cowboys are going to do, man.
Oh, yeah. They're stuck to Dak, especially after restructuring a contract. That makes it really hard to move off of them ever in the future. So, yeah, they're all in on Dak and CD, trying to make a last push there. But I'm excited. I really do enjoy NFL free agency, even if there's not a ton of big fish in the pond, or if the draft isn't as top-heavy as it has been in years past. I think all of this is super interesting, because this is where you see some teams kind of panic, or you see some teams kind of hit home runs and turn into contenders. Lastly, while we're talking NFL, there has been some chatter. The Titans might be moving off the first overall pick. Sounds like the Giants have been really interested in trading for the number 1 pick in the draft. That would be interesting, because you would expect the Giants, if they were to do that, to probably take one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. Or maybe in free agency they decide to go Aaron Rodgers.
They don't want the smoke. They don't want the scrutiny of the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I guess. You're talking Tennessee.
As far as Tennessee goes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, if I'm Tennessee, and New York calls me up and says, hey, we'll give you our first-round pick this year, which is the 3rd overall pick, by the way, our first-round pick next year, and then Kayvon Thibodeau. He was a first-round pass rusher taken a couple of years ago. I'd take that deal any day if I was Tennessee.
It's not a bad deal.
No, you get a free first-round pick next year that's going to be top 5 from the Giants, because they're always a top 5 pick now. As long as they've got Joe Shane over there.
I think it would be a good move. I think Tennessee has a lot of questions, has a huge question at quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't think Mason Rudolph, I don't think Will Levis is a long-term
not at all.
options. But at the same time, I don't know if they are fully bought into a Cam Ward or a Shedeur Sanders.
I think that's the biggest mistake you can make in the NFL, is taking a quarterback just to take one.
Right.
Don't feel like you have to. If next year's quarterback class is going to be a lot better, get some pieces now. Get the New York Giants pick, which is going to be bad, or a good pick. They're going to be a bad team. Take that pick and run.
Then you get, potentially an extra player out of it that can ultimately come in and make a difference. Like you mentioned Thibodeau. And I think Thibodeau could be a good pickup for Tennessee.
Plus whoever you would take at number 3 this year, whether that's a pass rusher or Travis Hunter. Or maybe you still get a quarterback. I don't know. We'll see.
I just don't think that they're bought into the quarterbacks that are available this year.
No, I wouldn't be. Not that high. Not that high. No. All right, let's take a break. Coming up next, we'll talk RSL as we wrap up this show. Real Salt Lake, interesting game today. They play San Diego FC, the expansion franchise, the newest team in the MLS. We'll talk that next as we wrap this thing up. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Wrapping up another edition of the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napolis with me. Alex, RSL taking on San Diego FC tonight, 7:30 first kick.
First time ever, right? This is the new expansion side. This is a new team coming into the league. This is the first time they come out to Sandy, first time they'll ever play this side. And Real Salt Lake, good bounce back performance last week, getting that 2-0 win over Seattle. And now they'll look to continue on that performance, hopefully getting 3 points against the new expansion side.
How does the expansion team work in the MLS? Do they do like an expansion draft?
They do. They do an expansion draft where you get to select 5 guys from other teams in the league, and then from there you're kind of on your own. You only get 5 players, which is interesting considering it's a 30-man roster. But then from there you kind of have to figure out the rest of it. Obviously there's the super draft, which is just the draft where you get like the college guys and the picks, and I think a lot of the expansion sides rely on that a lot, but then there's a lot of flexibility with expansion sides of being able to go out and make some big signings. San Diego necessarily hasn't made too many, but I think they're still a team that's gonna try to figure it out.
RSL 1-1 on the season, 1 win, 1 loss. San Diego FC 1 win, 1 draw. So we'll see what that looks like as RSL tries to find their footing again. In case you've missed it, ton of off-season moves for Real Salt Lake this season, and we'll see. It's probably going to be a little bit of an adjustment period as they try to figure out who their go-to guys are going to be. I know head coach Pablo Mastroeni was on with DJ and PK yesterday morning, and he was kind of talking about it's a lot different, but it's nice, like in training sessions and things like that, to not have a number one guy where it's like you can kind of trust anybody to step up and really, you don't have to rely on just one person to carry your team. It's more so you can go out to these practices and it's like, oh yeah, so-and-so had a big game. Okay, let's play him minutes. We don't have to worry about our star player not getting their minutes.
Right. And I think ultimately Real Salt Lake will do what they can to bring in a guy who can fill in that role left behind by, your former star player. But right now, I think the team is doing a really good job of finding ways to score and finding ways to generate some offense without that number one guy. Forster Ajago, 2 games, 2 goals. We'll see if he can continue it tonight. The new guy, too, Ari Pule, the Australian striker, showed some good signs against Seattle last week. And so there's options there. I think they just need a little bit more time to adapt.
Again, that is a 7:30 first kick pre-match show at 6:30, as always, here on The Zone. And that's the only thing we have going on in the evening. So that'll be on 97.5 and 1280. Earlier in the day, though, coming up not too long after this, Utah State pregame show, 1:30, 2 o'clock tip-off at home in Logan. Senior night against Air Force as the Aggies try to end their regular season on a high note before they get into the Mountain West tournament.
They have to.
I was looking, there was some posts on social media. It looks like the seeding for the Mountain West tournament is all but wrapped up as far as the Aggies go, unless they, knock on wood, hopefully they don't, but unless they lose this game, it looks like they'll be playing the winner of Air Force and UNLV.
As far as the bracket
Mountain West
in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's how the bracket is looking right now.
Again, I think we mentioned it a little bit earlier, Christian. I think they just need to finish the season off strong, finish it off with a win, and take some confidence into Las Vegas, man. They need it right now considering the last 2 games didn't go their way.
much needed confidence. And it's just crazy. I mean, the confidence that this team played with at times throughout the season just was gone in their last 2 games. And I don't really know what the cause of that was. But I think it's important not to overreact. I think there was a lot of fan overreaction, people saying some not very nice things on social media. So you always hate to see that. Hopefully the players can keep that out of their heads and not let that affect them. But again, that is Utah State taking on Air Force, 2 p.m. tip-off in Logan, 1:30 pregame here on the Zone. Alex, you're going to be producing that, so
I'll be there.
Bring some good luck into the studio. All right, that's it for today. Oh, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that's the hope.
That's the hope. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.